Okay, one last crack at this before I have to go home for my dinner. I've done about 20 attempts at this video, but we'll try 21. So it's a review of the GS310, end of year review. I've done the CF Moto, the Triumph and the Vogue so far. I've got a few more to do, but just wanted to talk about this bike that's been on my fleet for 3 years now. Last year it had the Rally Raid Stage 2 kit fitted to it. Somebody's actually made me an offer on it, so it's going to be sold relatively soon and moved on, which, to be honest, it feels like it's at the end of its journey, this bike. You know, it's been out 7 or 8 years. 2017 the first one came out, and it's floated along. It's sort of hummed along in the background while other bikes have come out and maybe trumped it a little bit. And now with the G310GS coming through, being showcased at the recent shows, and I think this is probably finding at the end of its shelf life. So I would expect 2025 to be the last year of it. I brought these two bikes in. They're the two bikes I picked up to, and I'll do a video on this one just to show what's out there for a couple of grand. You know, the Cross Country 650 was 250, and this was 250 as well. So there's a lot of good bikes out there that are going to take you a lot of good miles. So the point was that you don't need to buy a brand new bike when there's good stuff already out there. But these two bikes in question shine a bit of a light on this, and also on BMW and where they've been, where they are, and where they're going. You know, clearly the cross country there was when BMW, all they made was premium priced bikes, but with premium quality. That's a really nicely constructed bike, adjustable suspension, spoke wheels, nice punchy engine, lightweight. It's about 170 kilos wet. So it's when they were serious about building small capacity bikes. The problem is I don't think anybody bought one, and that was the issue. They were building quality bikes at premium prices, but the market at the time, certainly 10, 15 years ago, they were all about bigger bikes, so that they didn't go anywhere. Nobody bought them, and they were discontinued after 2 years, I think that was. It came a bit more mainstream with the G650GS. They outsourced the engine production to China by launching. So it's clearly they were trying to strip out some of the cost, but it's still a very solid bike. It's actually really well put together. It's aged really well, that bike, and I'm looking forward to doing a video on that, because I really want to get out and ride this, because it just, for £2,200, a hell of a lot of bike for the money, and that Rotax engine is a peach. So that gives us a bit of a guiding light as to where we've ended up here. And I think for 2017, BMW got to the point where they just needed to build a cheap bike to tap into the emerging markets, which I guess is where most bikes are sold. You know, Southeast Asia, India, Thailand, Malaysia, South America even, places like that. So this bike was born, I think, out of that ambition to build volume in the emerging markets. Because I suppose if you build volume with a cheaper bike, then that customer will grow and then grow onto an 800 or a 1200. So it was a very different intention with this bike over, say, that bike. There they were trying to set out to build the best smaller capacity adventure bike they could, price irrespective. By this point, they didn't really care about the quality so much. Well, they did to a degree, but the price was paramount. Building it cheap was paramount. So what we got was a bike built in India by partner company TVS. It's got a kind of, a lively engine, but it takes a lot of revs to get it going. It's a single cylinder 313cc engine, 34 brake horsepower, not a lot of torque, so you need to give it a bit of rev off the bottom to get it going, which is one of the criticisms of the earlier bikes. It had very soft suspension, it had cast rims, it's clearly stripped out some cost, but it was a decent bike. It compared nicely to a Versys 300, a V-Strom 250. It came out at that time when I think all manufacturers were just doing, it's a small capacity bike, therefore it doesn't have to be that good. We don't have to develop it that much. It'll share platforms with the road bike version, so therefore it's going to be compromised. I don't think they weren't really taking it seriously. They were just building it to get it out there, and that's what this feels like. Now, that's not to say it's not a good bike. I enjoyed riding it. It's very comfortable. I think it's better at the end of the day than at the beginning of the day, if that makes sense. When you're tired, when you're just riding to do some miles, this has got a nice relaxing feel to it. It's comfortable. It's got decent wind protection. The seat's good. It's just a nice relaxing bike to do the miles on. The KTM 390 impresses in the morning. It's faster, it's more focused, more ferocious, but then it tires towards the end of the day. So I was finding customers were having KTMs for a while, getting bored of them because they were a bit too demanding. And then they'd swap to something like this because it just allowed them to relax on their travels. So it'd do motorway work, it'd sit at 80 miles an hour, it'd do trail work, not extensively because it was only a 19-inch front and a 17-inch rear with quite broad tyres. So it wasn't a trail bike, but it would still do gravel track. And I've had a couple of guys on these to Iceland. We did the Iceland tracks last year with them. and then a few others who did the Stella Alpina on these bikes. So for that sort of travel trail riding, it actually was pretty good. You know, not class leading, not legendary, but for the price that you could pick one up for, they were good bikes. You know, £3,500 to get you a bike with a couple of thousand miles on, a year or so old, and it would do everything you wanted to do. And I think that's where it found favour in that sort of market. People just a motorcycle that was reliable and robust. I've got to say, this one has taken some hammer, and I know John Rallyraid's demo bike, that's had some hammer as well, but they take a lot of beating, even without side guards and things. The structure of the bike is solid. In terms of things going wrong, nothing's gone wrong. It's not needed pads. I think it's just had rear pads actually. Chain's been good. For all intents and purposes, it's a well-constructed bike that's built to last, that's built to take some abuse. So if you're looking for a commuter bike or a back road travel bike or a tour bike that's not got a tall seat, I think it's only about an 810, 820 mil seat height. What sort of puts some people off is this hump at the back. So if you're a bit short or a bit older, you can't get your leg up and over, it's quite a raised there. You could take this rack off, that would make it a little bit easier, but ultimately it's this hump, which is a shame, because if the seat had carried on at this height, it would have been far more accessible for more people. But it's pretty lightweight, about 182 kilos, so a touch heavier than the cross country, but certainly lighter than the G310GS. So on my fleet, it didn't blow anybody away, I've got to be honest. You know, there were bikes that shout much louder, that go much faster, that look better and do the job in a more sophisticated way. But, you know, there were some people that always warmed to this. They could see its virtues. They were hidden virtues. They took a little bit more time to entice out, to get to understand and to know. You know, those people who just jumped on it and thrashed it, they probably didn't find what they were looking for in it. Because they had to work a little bit harder, you know, or spend a little bit more time in the saddle. I think what's interesting with this bike is that I don't think it really caught on. It didn't really take off. It wasn't really a great success. I think part of that reason is the greed of BMW. You know, they priced this at twice the price of the 411 Himalayan in India. And it's not twice the bike. It's not even comparable in some ways. In some ways, you'd argue the Himalayan was a better GS than the GS. You know, for an on-road, off-road bike, that Himalayan, the 411, was the perfect GS on-road, off-road type bike. This wasn't as good off-road as the Himalayan. You know, it wasn't as good as a travel bike as the Himalayan if you were starting to get into rocky terrain and things like that. So they were greedy with the pricing, which I think it blunted the bike's appeal. And then they never pushed it either. So this bike was kind of left alone to sort of languish on the showroom, not really being pushed. With this new 450, I think clearly BMW have realised that there's a lot of aging riders who want a smaller capacity bike, but they don't want it to be cheap. They want it to be good. You know, heaven forbid. It's not that people buying smaller bikes haven't got no money. It's just they want less weight, they want more manageability, but they still want premium features. And I think that's where they're going back to. If we take a U-shape, premium price, premium bike, it dipped a bit here and it dipped a bit here, and now they're going back up. And I think what we'll see with that 450GS is the virtues of that bike rather than this bike, and therefore a price tag more of that bike than this bike. So I think that's why the new one is going to be more like 8.5, maybe 9. I've even heard rumour of, but the quality is hopefully going to match that price tag. All BMW have got to hope is that the customer will pay that. You know, we say we'll pay it. People will say they'll pay it a premium price for a small capacity bike, but will they? The market is littered with premium price, premium quality small capacity bikes that didn't sell because they weren't seen as great value. CCM GP450 being one, the cross country being one, the G450X being one, the HP2 being another. The BMW's past is riddled with failed projects where they've tried to give the customer what they said they wanted, and then the customer said no. We don't want that. We want a GS 1200 or GSA 1200. You know, so we're a fickle bunch. We don't buy what we say we will. So I think that's where we're at with this bike. It's not great. It's not a great BMW, but it's a good enough bike. And if you're just wanting cheap thrills, cheap practicality, I don't think you can go far wrong. Somebody asked me in one of the other comments, which to get Euro 4, Euro 5. I personally haven't ran a Euro 4 and a Euro 5. I really much prefer the 5 because look, that ride-by-wire throttle is well set up and it limits some of that stally nature that you got with the 4. It was easier to ride, and I certainly found my customers didn't stall it as easy, the 5, as they did the 4. You lose this ability to switch ABS off at the rear, but to be honest, that's neither here nor there, unless you wanted to skid turn things, which I don't tend to. This type of bike, you're not riding it to the limit where you're going to need to disable rear ABS to, drift out that rear. So I don't think it's irrelevant whether you can turn ABS on or off or not. In terms of the rally raid kit, this added about £3.5 grand. I got it second hand, so I didn't pay that. I paid £1.5 grand for the forks, the internals, the shock, and the wheels. It's a lot of money to throw at it, and I think that sums up where BMW were with this bike. That cross country, I don't think you could throw much money at that to improve it. It pretty much is there, whereas BMW clearly, and I think this is a shame with this bike. When the Rally Raid kit goes on it, you realise what a great bike it had potential to be, but BMW clearly just had to strip the price out of it. So it does need a shock if you wanted to push harder. It does want spoke wheels, even for vanity, for the fact that it looks better. It's clear. I think it's clear with the 310 they were developing a great bike, and then the people in accounts or whoever, the project overseers, decided it had to come in at a lower cost, and therefore all the good bits had to be stripped away, and to put bits on afterwards costs a lot of money. So yeah, it's a real shame. And I think also the problem with this bike, you put all the good stuff on, the suspension and things, but the engine doesn't go with it. If that makes sense, the chassis becomes better than the engine, and so it looks great, it rides great, but you just want a bit more meat. And I think it's different to that Triumph 400X that had got a great engine that just needed a better chassis, better suspension to bring it to life. And once you put suspension on it, it all happens in parity, in unison. Whereas this, you put better suspension on, but the engine then starts to feel a bit underwhelming. So in a way, the best 310GS is a stock 310GS because the expectations match the bike. So don't rush out to spend money on it. Maybe a rear shock if you're finding it's wallowing a lot, which the standard one tends to do. If you're putting a lot of luggage on or you're a bigger rider, you might want to put a rear shock on. But otherwise, spend £3.5 grand on a year-old bike, ride it into the ground, and I think you'll have had a great time on it. I think you'll have had a great bike that built to last. Not the best BMW, but it wasn't priced to be the best BMW. So I'll be semi-sad to see it go, but there's a lot of good stuff coming. So, yeah. That'll do. Cheers.